May I ask a question about the French Revolution? Of course, go ahead. What would you like to know? Could you explain the concept of photosynthesis again? Certainly. Photosynthesis is the process by which plants use sunlight to create energy. I didn't understand the last part of the algebra equation. Can you repeat it? Sure. Let's go through the equation step by step on the board. What's your opinion on the main character's actions in To Kill a Mockingbird? That's a great question for discussion. What do others think about Atticus Finch's choices? How does this biology experiment relate to real-world applications? This experiment demonstrates cell division, which is crucial in understanding cancer research. Can we have a group discussion about the causes of World War II? Excellent idea. Let's break into small groups and then share our findings with the class. I'm having trouble with this chemistry problem. Can you help me? Of course. Let's look at it together and see where you're getting stuck. What's the difference between a simile and a metaphor? Good question. A simile uses like or as for comparison, while a metaphor directly states the comparison. Could you recommend some additional reading on ancient Egypt? Certainly. I'll provide a list of books and articles that will enhance your understanding of the topic. How do you calculate the area of a triangle? The formula is area equals base times height divided by 2. Let's practice with some examples. Can we have a debate on the pros and cons of social media? That's a great idea. Let's divide the class into 2 groups and prepare arguments. What's the significance of the Industrial Revolution in world history? The Industrial Revolution marked a major turning point in history. Let's discuss its global impacts. How do you conjugate irregular verbs in Spanish? Irregular verbs don't follow standard patterns. Let's review some common ones together. Can you explain the water cycle in more detail? Certainly. The water cycle involves evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. Let's draw a diagram. What's the main theme of Shakespeare's Macbeth? Ambition is a central theme. Let's analyze how it drives the character's actions. How does gravity affect the motion of planets? Gravity is key to planetary motion. Let's use the solar system model to demonstrate. Can we do a hands-on activity for this art history lesson? Great suggestion. Let's try recreating some famous paintings in small groups. What's the difference between qualitative and quantitative research? Good question. Qualitative deals with descriptive data, while quantitative involves numerical data. How do you solve quadratic equations? There are several methods. Let's start with the factoring method and then move to the quadratic formula. Can you explain the concept of supply and demand in economics? Certainly. Supply and demand are fundamental to market economics. Let's use a graph to illustrate. What's the proper format for citing sources in an essay? It depends on the citation style. We're using MLA format, so let's review those guidelines. How do muscles and bones work together in the human body? They form the musculoskeletal system. Let's use the skeleton model to show how they interact. Can we have a class discussion about climate change? Absolutely. Let's start by listing the causes and effects, then discuss potential solutions. What's the difference between a noun and a pronoun? Good question. A noun names a person, place, or thing, while a pronoun replaces a noun in a sentence. How do you balance chemical equations? Balancing equations ensures mass conservation. Let's practice with some examples on the board. Can you explain the concept of democracy in political science? Certainly. Democracy is a system of government by the people. Let's discuss its key principles. What's the importance of the scientific method? The scientific method provides a systematic approach to research. Let's go through each step. How do you analyze a poem's structure and meaning? Great question. We'll look at elements like rhyme, meter, and imagery. Let's use Frost's The Road Not Taken as an example. Can we do a group project on renewable energy sources? Excellent idea. Let's divide into teams, each focusing on a different renewable energy type. What's the significance of DNA in genetics? DNA carries genetic information. Let's use this model to show its structure and function. How do you solve word problems in math? Word problems require careful reading. Let's break down the steps using an example. Can you explain the concept of symbolism in literature? Certainly. Symbolism uses objects or ideas to represent something else. Let's find examples in our current novel. What's the difference between weather and climate? Good question. Weather is short-term conditions, while climate is long-term patterns. Let's discuss further. How do you conduct a proper science experiment? We'll follow the scientific method. Let's start by forming a hypothesis for our next lab. Can we have a mock trial for our history class? That's a creative idea. Let's assign roles and prepare arguments based on historical events. What's the importance of the periodic table in chemistry? The periodic table organizes elements by properties. Let's explore its structure and use. How do you write a persuasive essay? A persuasive essay requires a clear thesis and supporting arguments. Let's outline the structure together. Can you explain the concept of ecosystems in biology? Sure. An ecosystem includes living organisms and their environment. Let's use the terrarium as an example. What's the significance of the Renaissance in art history? The Renaissance was a period of cultural rebirth. Let's look at some key artworks from this era. How do you solve problems involving probability? Probability deals with the likelihood of events. Let's practice with some coin toss and dice roll examples. Can we do a presentation on different cultures for our language class? That's a great way to practice language skills. Let's assign countries and prepare short presentations. What's the difference between a physical and chemical change? Good question. Physical changes don't create new substances, while chemical changes do. Let's demonstrate both. How do you analyze primary sources in history? Analyzing primary sources involves considering context and bias. Let's practice with this historical document. Can you explain the concept of forces in physics? Certainly. Forces are pushes or pulls that can change an object's motion. Let's use these spring scales to demonstrate. What's the importance of thesis statements in essays? A thesis statement presents the main argument. Let's practice writing strong thesis statements for your essays. Pause for 2 seconds. How do you graph linear equations? Graphing linear equations involves plotting points. Let's use the coordinate plane to practice. Can we have a class debate on a current event? That's a great way to practice critical thinking. Let's choose a topic and prepare arguments. What's the significance of the Bill of Rights in the U.S.? Constitution? The Bill of Rights protects individual liberties. Let's discuss each amendment and its importance. How do you properly use laboratory equipment in chemistry? Safety is crucial in the lab. Let's review the proper use of beakers, burners, and other equipment. Can you explain the concept of plate tectonics in geology? Certainly. Plate tectonics explains Earth's surface movements. Let's use this model to demonstrate continental drift.